Cannons fired so continuously that soldiers later described the ground itself shaking beneath their feet. Smoke swallowed the battlefield near Borodino as thousands of French and Russian soldiers disappeared into explosions, mud, and collapsing formations. Entire infantry lines were torn apart by artillery before they could even reach the enemy, but the fighting never stopped. Again and again, Napoleon's army pushed forward through cannon fire while Russian troops refused to retreat. Officers screamed orders through smoke so thick many soldiers could barely see more than a few meters ahead. By the end of the day, more than 70,000 men would be dead or wounded. And even though Napoleon won the battle, something inside his empire began breaking at Borodino. 1812. At the height of his power, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Russia with the largest army Europe had ever seen. More than 500,000 soldiers from across the French Empire marched eastward toward the Russian interior. Napoleon expected another rapid campaign like the victories that had crushed Austria, Prussia, and much of Europe before, but the Russians refused to fight. Instead, they retreated deeper into their own territory, burning villages, destroying supplies, and leaving empty land behind them. French soldiers marched through smoke-filled settlements, abandoned farms, and endless roads already covered with exhaustion before the decisive battle had even begun. The deeper Napoleon advanced into Russia, the more dangerous the campaign became. Then finally, near the village of Borodino, the Russian army stopped retreating. For the first time in months, they prepared to stand and fight. As French forces approached Borodino, they saw the Russians building massive defensive positions across the battlefield. Earthworks rose across the hills, cannons lined the ridges. Thousands of Russian soldiers prepared behind trenches and fortifications while priests walked through the ranks blessing exhausted troops waiting for battle. At the center of the defense stood the Great Redoubt, a huge fortified artillery position that would soon become one of the deadliest locations in the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon studied the battlefield carefully. The Russians were no longer trying to delay him. Now they were waiting for him. Across the cold morning landscape, more than 100,000 soldiers stood preparing for collision while artillery crews loaded cannons in silence. Then, at dawn on September 7, 1812, the battlefield exploded. Hundreds of cannons opened fire across Borodino almost simultaneously. The sound was overwhelming. French infantry advanced through smoke while Russian artillery blasted massive holes through attacking formations. Soldiers vanished beneath explosions as cavalry charged across fields already covered in bodies and shattered equipment. Again and again, French forces attacked the Russian lines. Again and again, the Russians resisted. Again and again, the Russians resisted. Smoke rolled so heavily across the battlefield that entire units became lost inside the chaos. Officers struggled to control formations while wounded soldiers crawled through mud mixed with blood and broken weapons. Every captured position turned into another killing zone. Drums echoed through cannon fire. Horses collapsed beside shattered artillery. And still the fighting intensified. By midday, Napoleon's troops finally reached the Russian defensive center near the Great Redoubt. That was where the battle became truly horrifying. The Great Redoubt turned into a battlefield inside the battlefield. French troops launched repeated assaults directly into devastating artillery fire while Russian defenders fought desperately behind earthworks already covered in smoke, blood, and collapsing bodies. Cannons fired almost point-blank into attacking soldiers. Cavalry smashed through shattered defenses. Infantry fought hand-to-hand inside burning fortifications as wounded men screamed beneath the chaos surrounding them. Again and again, Russian counterattacks pushed the French backward. Again and again, Napoleon sent more soldiers forward. The battlefield no longer looked organized. It looked like destruction swallowing entire armies alive. Even Napoleon himself hesitated during the fighting. Historians still debate why he refused to fully commit his elite imperial guard while the battle reached its deadliest phase. Finally, after hours of slaughter, French forces captured the Great Redoubt, but victory no longer felt triumphant. Borodino already looked like hell. By evening, the Russian army began retreating from the battlefield. Technically, Napoleon had won, but the cost was catastrophic. Tens of thousands of French and Russian soldiers had been killed or wounded in a single day of fighting. Fires burned across the battlefield while exhausted survivors walked through smoke searching for wounded comrades among piles of bodies and destroyed equipment. The Russians had retreated, yet they had not collapsed. That changed everything. Napoleon opened the road toward Moscow, but his army was no longer the unstoppable force that had once terrified Europe. Borodino exposed something dangerous for the first time. The French Empire could bleed, and deep inside Russia, far from home, Napoleon's greatest victory was already beginning to feel like the start of his destruction.